create better criminals, not better citizens. We must build prisons on a historic scale, deport foreign national offenders faster than ever, and speed up our courts. Yet still, despite all that, we must reform sentencing too. So, more in hope than expectation, despite, not because of experience, and by appealing to...
Before we dive into what might be the most significant shift in British immigration policy in decades, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what's coming next because UK Connors breaks down the politics that actually matter, without the waffle. Right? Let's get into it. Picture this. 800,000 people, all potentially eligible to apply for permanent residence in Britain starting this January. That's not a typo. 800,000. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the population of Leeds, all queuing up for indefinite leave to remain after their mandatory 5 years in the country. And Shabana Mahmood, Labour's Home Secretary, has just looked at that number and decided enough is enough. The question is, has she left it too late, or is this precisely the moment Britain needed someone to pull the emergency brake? Here's what's actually happening, stripped of the political theatre. The government is doubling the residency requirement for indefinite leave to remain from 5 years to 10. But that's just a headline. And if you've been following UK Connors, you know we don't do surface-level analysis. The real story is far more intricate, far more controversial, and frankly, far more revealing about where Britain finds itself in 2025. Mahmood isn't just extending the timeline. She's introducing what amounts to a citizenship obstacle course. Want to stay permanently? Fine. But you'll need to be in work, making national insurance contributions, speaking English to a high standard, maintaining a spotless criminal record, and here's a kicker, demonstrating you've given back to your community through volunteering or similar contributions. Oh, and you cannot have claimed a single penny in benefits. Not one. This isn't immigration policy as we've known it. This is immigration policy reimagined as a merit-based endurance test. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the 1.3 million people in the room. Between 2021 and 2024, that's precisely how many people arrived in Britain during what's being rather pointedly referred to as a Boris wave. You remember Boris Johnson's tenure, don't you? The man who campaigned on taking back control, reducing immigration, all those delightful slogans. Well, under his watch and his immediate successors, Britain experienced migration numbers that would have been considered politically catastrophic just a decade earlier. In the year to June 2023 alone, net migration hit 906,000. Not 90,000. 906,000. The previous year to June 2024 saw 1,235,254 people move to the UK, accounting for 98% of the country's entire population growth. Those aren't statistics. That's a demographic transformation happening in real time. And here's where Mahmood's plan gets genuinely fascinating, because she's caught in an impossible position. The new 10-year rule won't apply retrospectively. That would be legal chaos, potentially humanitarian crisis territory, and Labour knows it. But that leaves the Boris wave cohort in a strange limbo. The Home Office is apparently considering separate measures specifically for them, though what those measures look like remains conveniently vague. A political tightrope walking at its finest. Too harsh, and you're accused of retrospectively changing the rules on people who came here legally. Too lenient, and the very voters Labour needs to win back will ask what the point of the new system even is. But Mahmood isn't just selling policy changes. She's selling a narrative, and it's one worth examining closely because it reveals how Labour is trying to reclaim ground they've lost to the populist right. At the Labour Party conference, she spoke about patriotism transforming into ethno-nationalism, about people who struggle to accept that someone who looks like her, with a faith like hers, can be truly British. It's deeply personal rhetoric from Britain's first female Muslim cabinet minister. She's acknowledging the rising tide of nationalist sentiment while simultaneously trying to diffuse it by appearing tough on immigration. The subtext is clear. Labour understands your concerns about control, about cohesion, about the pace of change. Now trust us to manage it properly. The political calculation here is transparent, but no less significant for being so. Labour inherited a migration situation that was, to use a technical term, absolutely bonkers. The Conservatives spent 14 years talking tough on immigration whilst presiding over record-breaking numbers. They created the problem through policy choices, particularly around international students, health and care workers, and post-Brexit work visa routes, then acted shocked when the numbers soared. Labour now gets to play the responsible adult in the room, the party willing to make difficult decisions about integration and social cohesion, rather than just shouting about small boats whilst an entire city's worth of people arrives through legal routes. But let's interrogate the proposed conditions for a moment, because they are far more ideologically loaded than they might initially appear. Requiring employment sounds reasonable until you consider carrying responsibilities, disability, or market conditions beyond an individual's control. Demanding community contribution through volunteering is a lovely sentiment, but who defines what counts as giving back? Must it be formally documented? What about people working 2 jobs just to stay afloat? The high standard English requirement will inevitably become a political football, with different governments defining proficiency differently depending on their electoral needs. And the blanket prohibition on benefit claims for a full decade? That's asking people to exist without the safety net that British citizens take entirely for granted. Mahmood's framework also introduces something deliciously Orwellian, the possibility of earning settlement earlier than 10 years based on contribution, or being forced to wait longer if you're not contributing enough. Some might even be barred entirely. Who decides? What metrics? Its immigration policy meets productivity monitoring meets social credit system. The British establishment does love a good means test, but this takes it to rather extraordinary levels. And then there's the warning. Mahmood has suggested that failure to control migration could lead to Britain tearing itself apart. She pointed to the Unite the Kingdom rally in September, where somewhere between 110,000 and 150,000 people turned out for an event organized by Tommy Robinson. She described participants as heirs to the skinheads and racists of previous generations. It's inflammatory language designed to draw a line in the sand. Either we control this through policy, or forces far uglier than bureaucratic point systems will attempt to control it through street politics and social fragmentation. Here's what makes this entire situation so precarious. Britain's population grew by 755,254 in the year to June 2024, the second highest increase on record. The previous record was set just a year before. These aren't anomalies. They are patterns. And patterns shape everything from housing availability to NHS waiting times to school places to wage competition to cultural integration. Mahmood can introduce all the stringent conditions you want, but if arrivals continue at comparable levels, she'll be managing the same pressure her conservative predecessors failed to handle, just with a longer naturalization timeline and more bureaucratic hoops. The fascinating paradox is that Mahmood might actually believe in the liberal ideal she's describing, where Britain remains open, tolerant, and generous, provided certain conditions are met. But she's also fundamentally acknowledging that openness has political limits, that tolerance requires reciprocity, and that generosity isn't infinite when resources feel scarce and systems feel strained. It's the eternal tension in the heart of progressive politics. How do you maintain humanitarian principles whilst responding to genuine public concern about pace, scale, and integration? What Mahmood is betting on is that British voters will accept immigration if it feels controlled, merit-based, and contributory rather than automatic. She's wagering that a tough-sounding policy framework will labor the political space to avoid either the chaos of unmanaged arrival or the ugliness of hard-right reaction. Whether she's right depends entirely on whether the numbers actually change, whether the public believes the system has integrity, and whether the next crisis, the next surge, the next unexpected variable undermines confidence before the policy even takes effect. So where does this leave Britain? With a Home Secretary trying to navigate between compassion and control, between historic immigration levels and rising nationalism, between legal obligations and political survival. The 10-year wait isn't just about immigration policy. It's about whether Labour can hold together a coalition of voters with fundamentally different visions of what Britain should be, and that, more than any individual policy detail, is what you should be watching. That's where we are. That's the reality beneath the headlines. If you want more analysis that actually explains what's happening in British politics without the spin, subscribe to UK Connors. We'll be here, breaking it all down, because the story is far